You know, we always want the easy road for our children. You know, we want to smooth that road out for them. We want to smooth out all the bumps that they're ever going to encounter. You know, because we care. We don't want to see our kids suffering. But is it really the best option, you know? Is it in their best interest long term? You should be more of a gentle nudge, you know, instead of like forcing them to do things or anything like that. But at the same time, if they don't succeed in it, they have to learn. And then they can start shaping their personality and their persona more, you know, where they're gonna learn to, you know, overcome obstacles. I start getting into more of a logical mindset where I could problem solve to solve this. And the same thing is true with martial arts. Martial arts is all about problem solving.
Welcome to the next episode of Black Belt Parenting Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, my partner in parenting, Tuhon Nick Sacoulas, or we like to call him Nick Sacoulas today. I really thought it was important for him to come on because he's my partner in parenting, but he's also the founder of the school that we run together. And so figuring out like parenting and how it relates to martial arts, he's actually the best guest to have on the show. So welcome.
Thank you.
I know it's nerve-wracking because we're together all the time. So I'm coming in today with some questions relating to martial arts and parenting. And so even though I already mostly know the answers to these questions, I wanted you guys to benefit from hearing from it as well. Can you give them a little bit of a background on how you started progressive martial arts?
Yeah, sure. But first, could I say something?
Sure.
I just want to acknowledge you for doing this. It's something that's, you know, like parenting doesn't come with like a manual or instructions. And we usually do things that, you know, we instinctively do or we're reactive to things. And you just kind of bring it to a light where it's like also a non-judgmental platform. I think it's awesome. You know, like I wish I had something like this, you know, when I was in my early stages of parenting. But I got to see it, you know, live with you, you know, being there, being an awesome mom and all that. So this is great. Thank you that you're doing this.
And also, so like, okay, this is going to be cheesy, but the whole idea of this podcast came because I had the opportunity to be part of this thing that we have together. And so I would never have these ideas and sort of this platform if I did not engage in the school. And so if we didn't have our partnership in the school and at home, none of this would come to fruition.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to the question. How did you start the school?
So, you know, I was a young man. I was in my mid-20s, and it was just something I always dreamed of doing. Like I wanted to build a community and just have like-minded people to train with. You know, I never saw the martial arts as being like a job. You know, it was just something I really loved to do. And, you know, it was just taking that leap of faith and moving forward for it. Like I knew it was a good formula as far as like the different martial arts that we were doing. I lacked in areas like, you know, having any type of business sense. You know, I started with, you know, my office being the chair in the corner with a box. You know, like it wasn't anything there, and wasn't even like, you know, again, not there for the money or anything. Like I wouldn't even remember when it was time for people to pay their membership. Like they would walk up to me insisting that they pay, and I was like, oh, I guess that's good. You know, I could get to keep this going a little longer. So, you know, that was basically it. But it was also to kind of acknowledge and also to continue the legacy of my instructors. I think that's very important. A lot of times in life, you know, people don't give attribution. You know, they don't give a sense of like, you know, like I learned this from this person or that person, to acknowledge that, you know, because that's also like a sense of humility. A lot of people in the martial arts, they act like they made it up on their own, you know, so it always comes from somewhere. And to, you know, to acknowledge that and to also, you know, continue or expand on their teachings and being able to do that, you're also carrying on their legacy. And also like the 10,000 hands before them, you're kind of just always keeping it there. And, you know, that's very important to me.
What's really great about my husband is that he followed his passion. Like a lot of people are just like going on this route of like, I'm gonna go to high school, I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna follow like this traditional route of, you know, what everybody does. And what is really admirable about you is that you followed something that you really love to do.
Yeah.
What gave you the sort of like the impetus for that? What was the impetus for that? And what gave you the confidence to go down that route?
Well, like I have that personality where it's like if I don't really like something or I'm not into it as much, I don't really put my best foot forward. You know, there was nothing, you know, I went to college, there was nothing that really interested me. I was doing liberal arts for a year and a half. You know, they're like, you got to pick a major, and there was nothing that really, you know, I wanted to pursue in that sense. So something like the martial arts is something I was pursued and done with passion. I researched it. I went into like depth with it. You know, like that was something that empowered me. And then to be able to teach someone, and you see how you're also giving them that ability to kind of like to learn, you know, that type of like the skill sets, but also like the mindset behind it. It's really empowering, and that's and very rewarding, you know, to me. So it's really great to be to have the opportunity to pass that on.
The one thing that I think a lot of parents, they're afraid of letting their kids follow those types of passions, right? Because they're afraid they're not going to be successful. And one of the things that he's shown me over the years is that if you're really passionate about something and you follow it, you can be very successful with it.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a great example for people. Like, you don't always have to go the traditional route, and you can figure out a way if you find out what drives you, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the essence of it. Like having that type of passion and love, and doing it, you know, to grow it in that sense. Not looking at it as like this is my career. Just following your dreams, you know, and then everything, the rewards come with it, you know, eventually. But you know, when you have passion for something, that's where you learn to develop the discipline, and the discipline to get things done, doing the things, you know, like. That you don't normally would do, you know, you have like this, it's a different type of drive. You know, the self-discipline is always more important than the motivation. The motivation will always fade. You know, you could be motivated today, you know, and then tomorrow you don't feel like doing it, you know, so, but having the self-discipline, that's something that you carry with you. Like that's your whole filter of how you see everything and how you approach everything. So that's very important to develop.
Yeah, and I feel like that's very essential in the martial arts, right?
Absolutely.
I think that one element is what people are seeking out when they come and join the school, and it's the one thing that keeps them there,
Yeah,
right?
yep, I agree.
So one of the reasons I brought you here is because you've been doing this much longer than I have, and I'm a learner from you. I'm very proud to say that. You know, my inspiration doing the martial arts, you're an amazing martial artist, but the biggest thing with you is that you're always evolving and you're always learning. And for me, that's very inspirational. I can't be around people that are not. So the one thing that I learned from you, and it's continuous, right, is that the martial arts school really isn't a place of just kicking and punching.
Right.
And so can you give us a story of, you've done this almost 30 years now just for the school, but you've been teaching longer, I feel like. What are some of the impacts that you've seen in the students that you've taught?
Yeah, so, you know, the first phase of training, like, you know, the way we break down our programs, you know, we have phase 1, 2, 3, there's a progression. So in the phase 1 program, you're not really sparring with anyone. You're not even doing very like free flow type of drills with each other. The first phase is about conquering yourself, right? It's about, you know, you're going to go to battle every day with your number one enemy, and that's you. You know, so when we say we develop self-discipline, you know, we help you develop self-discipline, it's not really us that are, you know, we're not disciplining them by, you know, reprimanding them and making them do push-ups and things like that. We're teaching you that for you to be successful in something like this, you have to create discipline for yourself. You have to come to class consistently. You know, it doesn't have to be every day, but if it's 2-3 days a week, right, you lock those days in. You schedule your life around that. So that's part of it. Having your uniform clean and ready before every class. You show up to the school with no uniform, you don't participate. A lot of people will look at it because it's a t-shirt, you know, so it's casual. I could just wear any t-shirt. But if you walked into a karate studio where they wear traditional gis and kimonos, you walked in with jeans and t-shirt and you're like, I'm here for class, they'll be like,
Get out.
Like you can't expect that you're going to take class, you know? So having your uniform clean, being a good training partner, you know, and being there not just for yourself but for everyone else. Like your training partners depend on you. So the biggest transformation I see is when they go through this phase. You know, like you're always going to have like your dabblers, like people that will come in because, you know, they watched a UFC event, or like the parents just want them to do something, you know, for the summer, you know, and they just kind of enroll them in something like that. So they kind of get there, you know, they're there for, so it will filter out the dabblers. But the people that will continue and stay with it, like you start to see them transform. You know, not only as martial artists, like you see their skills getting better, but you see them transform in like who they are, you know, like their true being, it changes, you know.
What have been, do you have like a specific story of somebody that you saw completely transform? I know you have a lot.
I have many, you know. I have students that, you know, were coming in with, you know, just kind of with their gold teeth and their pants down to their knees and all that, and they're very rude, and, you know, even one threatened a student, you know, because they were drilling and the guy accidentally hit him. He threatened him to meet him after the class, you know, and I basically had to, you know, and I was young as an instructor, so I basically, you know, just kind of like painted the picture for him. If he continued on this path, you know, it's going to lead to, you know, it's going to be a bad road. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that same student, you saw him, he kind of turned it around from that point on. Was with me for a couple more years, and then, you know, everyone has, like what we say, an expiration date. Eventually they'll leave. But he returned like 7 years later in a three-piece suit with glasses, and he looked at me, he's like, "Hey, Sifu, check me out, I'm a lawyer." And it's like, what? You know, like you see things like that. And now he's a judge, you know? So it's amazing the way it will kind of like, when they start having those, developing that type of self-discipline within themselves, and they're using the vehicle for the martial arts. And it's not, I'm saying it's not that only the martial arts provides this, but the martial arts also gives you something that is not available to in a lot of different endeavors.
Yeah, like our traditional education.
Yeah, because the martial arts will test you. You know, it'll test you, you know, and you have the choices between there of either, you know, just accepting where you are or becoming driven to become better. Mm. So that is you know, important, you know, to have that type of thing where you're always tested. You know, a lot of people, like, you know, if you go referencing it to like something like parenting, you know, we always want the easy road for our children. You know, we want to smooth that road out for them. We want to smooth out all the bumps that they're ever going to encounter. You know, because we care. We don't want to see our kids suffering. But is it really the best option, you know? Is it in their best interest long term? No. Where we're always, you know, doing that for them and, you know, bailing them out. Not saying you shouldn't be there, but you should be more of a gentle nudge, you know, instead of like forcing them to do things or anything like that. But at the same time, if they don't succeed in it, they have to learn. You know, you have to use that as a learning opportunity. And then they can start shaping their personality and their persona more, you know, where they're going to learn to, you know, overcome obstacles. You know, like it becomes more of like, you know, when I have an obstacle, you know, when I'm tested, I know, you know, I start getting into more of a logical mindset where I could problem solve to solve this. And the same thing is true with martial arts. Mm-hmm. Martial arts is all about problem solving.
I was just going to say that because I think it's such a great metaphor, like what we do on the training floor. Can you talk a little bit about the training and how that's a metaphor for that? Like overcoming obstacles, like how do you see it play out on the training floor?
Well, there's examples like for even young children, we have them testing for their next rank. So they know that there is, you know, there are certain requirements. Mm. Number one being the attendance. We talked about that, how important that is. The other thing is, you know, having a good attitude, right? It's not about, you know, complaining about, you know, or whining about the situation. You were on vacation and, you know, you didn't get to fulfill the required amount of classes. So, you know, you're going to whine, and it's usually the parent that's whining about it, that's asking for them to be tested because, you know, it's not fair to them or something. So when they actually do go test, you know, you could see some of the kids, especially when they're newer, they get stressed out about it, and that's okay. You know, so now when they're in their testing process and they succeed, And again, in the beginning, for the beginning ranks, we don't set up the student to fail. It's not a test where it's a pass-fail. If we invite you to the test, we know you could do it. Like, we believe in you, right? But now it's about them going through that process, and they have to now, fulfill the challenge or whatever it is. And when they succeed, you could see, like, it increases their self-image. And that's very important. It's not so much like what people think of you or what you think they think. It's more about what you think they think of you.
Yes.
It's how that's like a very strong filter. Your self-image is everything. So by succeeding in things like testing, it helps increase that, the self-confidence. And, it's like, when I'm tested, I could do things. So now that's like a little stepping stone. Every day, just being the challenge of getting to class.
Yeah.
You didn't have a good day, you didn't do this, you have other things to do, yet you still come to class. We had a pandemic, right? You could see there was a big drop off, but then there was those kids that stayed and they continued. They did things I could probably never do or want to do, where I'm gonna be in front of a camera and a laptop, and do martial arts in my living room.
Yeah.
And kids did that for a couple of years. And proud to say, last year we had a whole bunch of those kids testing for their black belt.
That's right.
Like, they didn't lose a step. So, that's important. When you're facing a person, let's say when you get to the levels of sparring, and it's not sparring that you're trying to, hurt each other or anything like that. We keep it very controlled, but it's still a test. It's a test of your skill and all that, but it's also how you're, you could see people making excuses or or why it didn't go well, or they're blaming an injury.
Or they get emotional when they get hit.
They get emotional,
Yeah.
right? They get reactive, all that stuff. But it's more or less, when they cultivate that, where they learn to kind of persevere and they use it as a learning experience, you could see that fortifies them and gets them stronger.
The martial arts, like, for parents, like, to have them undergo that part, I think sometimes it's hard for them. Like, what would your advice be to parents of kids who are training in the martial arts? Like, when you're watching them go through times like that where they want to quit or they're having trouble with certain techniques or the stress of testing or things like that.
Yeah, it's just about being there, being the support for them. Anytime we had a black belt test, we always invite the parents to stand next to them when I present them with their black belt. It takes a village, right, to raise a child. Right? We see it all the time. There's kids that will complain to their parents and say, listen, I don't want to do this anymore. And the parent will see that as a way out.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I got to take him 2-3 times a week to this place and do that and sit there, and sometimes, and, we suggest you stay and watch, but you don't have to be there. You could go shopping at that time. But the whole act of, like, getting up and doing it and getting them ready and you going through all that, it's a challenge. Like, one of my friends that lives out out east, he turned to me and goes, hey, I would definitely bring my kid to you, but, you're so far out. But he started jiu-jitsu. And I turned to him and I said, no, you started jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like, you are the one that's, like, you have to fully commit. And that's important. So when they're going through the testing, number one, it's really important that you trust the instructors. They invited you for a reason. We believe that they could do it. But at the same time, if they're not invited, you shouldn't question the instructors because we want it to be impactful for them. We want them to earn everything, and that's very important. And the parent has to have the same type of mindset. You have to earn, the praise. You have to earn that. You don't just give empty praises out to people because it doesn't really mean anything after a while. It's like people that just every day, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then, but what if it's that they say it from the heart and that there's authenticity behind it? It has to be authentic, the praise. You don't just do that to make them feel good for the moment, and they didn't do anything to earn that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, we could go.
I know.
The whole thing could be about that, but
I think but over the years, you've seen what happens when parents don't trust us, right, as instructors. Like, the lack of communication leads to what?
Yeah, dropout and fallout.
Yeah. So I think that understanding and trusting us as instructors becomes really important, and the partnership of us together, working together for the success of the child, is important.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is a good question because you became a dad yourself almost 15 years ago. How has that impacted your approach to martial arts or your way of instruction?
You know, and I see it in some of my staff especially, because I see how they are, you know, before they became parents, and I see how it had transformed them. I see it on how they teach.
Yeah.
And how they assist in classes, all that, right? So one thing it does teach you is to be more compassionate. They're children, right? They don't know better, but they will test you. They know exactly how far they could need to go to get their way. But you have to be able to set boundaries and all that. But you have to be understanding. You have to be very compassionate, you know, like put yourself in their situation. You know, be fair. Like all that type of stuff, and when they succeed, like cheer for them. You know, there's a lot of times like, you know, it's like almost there's people that are managers or bosses, and the only time they talk to their employees is when they do something wrong. They reprimand them right away. They never tell them it's a good job. It's like expected because you're getting paid for it, but that's what you should do. But a little bit of praise that is earned,
Yes.
when you give that, like people want that more than a raise. Obviously, they want to be rewarded, but sometimes giving them that when they know they've earned it, it goes a long way. People will ask for that more than something, you know, say, hey, that was great. Here's another bonus to your payment. Like that's okay, you know, but then they're doing it because they're expecting that type of monetary reward. So the same thing with, you know, when it comes to parenting, when they succeed, you know, you cheer for them. You're number one. You know, they know they could go to you and, you know, and that's another way to kind of help build their self-esteem and their confidence.
Yeah, and like, you know, those parents who sit on the sidelines and they become the extra coach, they're never very helpful on the sideline because it's like more criticism and it becomes less like motivating for the kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's, you know, the helicopter parents,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
that will do that, and that's natural. Like they will see, sometimes in a class filled with children, and there's, you know, an instructor with maybe an assistant or two, right? It's still a lot to manage, and sometimes they'll watch their kid and they know they're not pushing themselves, but that's not the time or place to reprimand them. That could be a conversation in the car.
Yeah.
You're saying, listen, I noticed that you weren't trying your best. You know, I need you to, you know, I want to see you try more. I know you could do better. Like, talk to them afterwards, not yelling from the sidelines. And then you're kind of bringing attention to them, you know, where like other kids are seeing it and like other parents are seeing it as well, you know. They might start doing it because they see you doing it. So there has to be, you know, you have to be able to control yourself in those situations. And most importantly is you have to trust the instructors, right? Martial arts, like anything, is a process. It's not something that you get in a day, you know? Like, oh, look what I learned. Look at this cool move I learned in the day, you know? For you to make that something where it is a reflexive response and you could do it, you know, instinctively, it takes time, it takes repetition. So it's okay to see them struggling or fall, you know, this and that. Our job is to remind them that they need to pick up the pace, you know, and everything else. But doing that in that moment as a parent to your kid, it's more damaging than it is rewarding or beneficial.
Right,
you know?
that's true. So alternatively, how has your parenting been impacted by the martial arts? So we have two girls. They're really good kids.
Yeah.
I think like we do a really good job working off of each other as partners, and we're constantly trying to learn. And I think that martial arts has really impacted the way that we parent because we have this experience of teaching kids. So can you talk a little bit about how that helped you become a better parent?
There's those opportunities, like you say, you know, like, oh, this is a teaching, you know, so this is like a teaching opportunity. This is something that we could, you know, use this moment, you know, and it could be them failing a test or doing something or not doing as good on a test, or, you know, and they don't feel like they met to your standards or their own standards. Those are all teaching opportunities, right? So being there in those moments where you could kind of give them a little bit of advice, without being too pushy, because I start to realize that as my daughter is getting older, she doesn't want to hear it as much. But the installs were all done when they were younger. Learning to, like having a good work ethic, not complaining about,
doing the things you have to do.
Yeah, doing those things that you have to do. Like our youngest daughter, Ava, she's a ballerina. She practices at least 10 hours a week. And I turned to her and I said, listen, I go, when I was younger, before I started martial arts, I wasn't like a super athlete where I was always picked first for the team. But I trained more than everyone else. Like I had that type of discipline and I loved doing it. And I see how that kind of, like she has taken that on.
Yeah.
And which is amazing because we have seen her progress, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah.
She's been doing so well. So those are like, opportunities, and also when they're going through something and they're, like a negative experience, they need to be, they have to have that trust with you as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes kids don't trust their parents, which is because they don't want to disappoint them. They don't want to, for us to be mad or anything like that. But having that, where you're that space, like that safe space for them, and they could tell you anything, that's something that's also earned, Not that they earned, but you have earned.
Yes.
So it helps you stay more, like you're more in control of yourself. Like the times that you do get upset or mad, instead of having like a response like, like yelling at them or screaming or raising your voice, you have to get that whatever it is you're doing, there's consequences that are attached to that.
Yes.
Maybe you won that fight, but at what cost? Now you're taking that, you're robbing them of that, you're robbing yourself of that trust. You're not, they're afraid of you now a little bit, like they don't want to disappoint.
So the martial arts has given you that sense of control and like to step back.
So now I would teach students, especially earlier before kids and all that, before I was even teaching kids, there would be, you're instructing the class, you're telling them step by step of what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And they just sometimes don't do it. Like, were you here? Were you listening? Like, sometimes, back then, especially, there would be some frustration where you would reprimand them. You'd say like, okay, you're not paying attention, push-ups and all that, right? So it's a little bit more
tyrannical.
A little bit, yeah. So it becomes that. So, having that experience, but how you see, people react to that type of criticism or anything. Like people don't want to feel stupid, like they don't want to, like that's probably the number one reason of quitting. Well, number one is getting hurt or the fear of getting hurt. And the other one is looking stupid or even feeling stupid.
Yeah.
So when you reprimand a person, to the point where, everyone has like a breaking point. Some people are very thick-skinned. You could say that and they'll appreciate it and they'll be like, yes, sir, and they'll try harder. But there's people that you'll break, just with a comment, because they look at you as someone that, they want to respect. This guy doesn't think anything of me. He's putting me down, and that affects their self-esteem, to the point where they even will quit martial arts.
Yeah.
And that's something that's, like I've taught plenty of people their last class in martial arts. Yeah. I'd like to think that there's less, that I'm personally responsible for. But that's part of the growth.
Yeah.
So I see my kids the same way. I try to be more patient. I try not to have outbursts. Notice I say I try not to have outbursts. But that's very important, on how they react to the situation. A lot of times my kids will look at me and they'll say, our kids will look at me and say, I'm sorry. And I tell them, don't say sorry. That's like almost a curse word in my world, saying sorry, because when you accept their apology in that moment, it almost gives them permission to do it again. I just tell them, and my kids know it, what do they say? What do you got to do now?
Fix it.
Yeah, fix it, correct the rep.
Correct the rep.
Like they'll say that word, that phrase. I'm like, what are you gonna do now? Like, correct the rep. Exactly, because you'll have an opportunity again when you're presented with those challenges or whatever it is that you're going through, and you made this decision based on that we both realized it wasn't the best decision, that's going to come up again one day. Now you have that opportunity to correct that rep.
Yeah.
So instead of saying sorry, say acknowledge it, admit to it, but don't say sorry. Just say, listen, I'll do better next time.
Yeah. And just take responsibility.
Take responsibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ownership.
So the martial arts community of progressive martial arts has been so like life-changing for so many people. And you've seen it over almost 30 years grow itself. Like, what do you think now about what you thought it was going to be and what it is today?
It's the main thing for me is I'm happy I did that for them, but I'm even more grateful they did it for me. To be able to facilitate something like, you know, our school, to bring families together and all that, and, you know, like their kids are all succeeding. They love the school for it. They know you've been a big part of their life. You know, I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that, to facilitate it and have a great staff, you know, where everyone is synced up on what the mission is of the school. You know, like our job is about taking our tribe and bringing them closer to mission, to whatever the mission is. And I think that we've been very successful in that.
So what is the mission?
It's just to facilitate a place where you're able to, you know, find a place, like a community, right? Which is very important.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people go for the martial arts and it's more about, you know, everything about them.
Yes.
You know, it's like, I'm doing it to get better. I'm doing this for me to be able to be fully self-expressed, right? It's a lot of self involved. But when you realize there's an entire tribe there for you, you know, you have all your peers that you are all, you know, kind of developing together. You're going through the ranks together. Like we've seen some of the most incredible bonds between our students, right? We've seen people get married from the school many times, and we've seen best friends, you know, develop there, and it's a great, you know, I mean that's amazing, right? But at the same time, when you have a place like, you know, you're being challenged at the same time, you're doing something fun, you know, that's important as well too. Like you have to enjoy the process.
Yeah.
You know, and trusting in the process is very important for us. You know, we'll always self-correct.
Yeah.
You know, if we see something that is not working out or, you know, we're not developing the student to his full potential and we see it, we immediately correct it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really amazing things about you is like, I have a hard time with confrontation and criticism because I take it personally a lot of times. And over the years, I've had to learn not to take criticism so personally. But what you do with it is so powerful because you always use it to get the school better.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so like, you know, parents will come and complain or students will come and complain and, you know, I'll always get defensive and take things personally. And you're always like, I really appreciate this communication. We're going to do our best to address it. And then the ability to then reconnect with them is born out of that one communication, and it's so powerful. And it shows how communication is key, and the ability to have rapport with your students and have that open door is essential in having a positive community, right? And a growing community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to thank you for coming today. I think it's so powerful for people to hear from the horse's mouth because you're one of my teachers. You're my husband, and people will be like, "Oh my God, she's saying you're her teacher," but you are, and not just because you're my martial arts teacher, but because you're my partner in life, and we're always constantly learning from each other.
Absolutely.
Right? And so he's made me a better parent. He's made me a better person, right? And I think what makes our relationship really powerful is that we're really wanting to be together because we grow together and we push each other to grow. And so it comes from the top, right? So when the school is better, it's because we're better.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us today for another episode of the Black Belt Parenting Podcast. I'd really like to hear about your partner in parenting. You know, hearing stories about other people really, you know, brings so much joy to me, and I get to hear all your stories. For more information about this podcast, please follow us on all the social media platforms that you might be enjoying this on. And please follow us on blackbeltparentingpodcast.com. Thanks again for joining us for this very special episode with Tuhon Nick Sacoulas. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you again soon. Please stay resilient, stay compassionate, and keep nurturing those black belt parenting skills. The Black Belt Parenting Podcast is produced and recorded by Press Record Studios.